The towering headquarters of Virex Dynamics stood like a monument to modern power, its walls made of black glass that reflected the city like a mirror. Inside the building, executives walked through polished halls with expensive watches flashing beneath cold white lights, while giant digital screens displayed profits, contracts, and expansion plans worth billions. At the very top floor, surrounded by silence and luxury, sat CEO Victor Hale, a man feared more than respected. Victor had built his reputation on one brutal philosophy: emotions weaken business. Loyalty meant nothing to him. People were replaceable. Results were everything. That morning, Victor stood before the boardroom window overlooking the city while his senior executives nervously waited behind him. The quarterly numbers were excellent, yet Victor's expression remained hard as stone. "Efficiency has dropped in the training division," he said without turning around. "I want the old system gone." One executive hesitated. "Sir, Daniel Reeves built that system." Victor slowly turned, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Exactly. It's outdated because it depends on one man." Nobody answered. Daniel Reeves was a name most employees barely remembered anymore, but the older staff knew the truth. Before Virex became a billion-dollar empire, Daniel had created the elite operational program that trained every top-performing employee in the company. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't political, but he understood people better than anyone. Years earlier, Victor himself had praised Daniel publicly as the backbone of Virex. But success changes men. As profits grew, Victor surrounded himself with consultants, analysts, and so-called experts from prestigious universities. Slowly, Daniel was pushed out of meetings, then projects, then visibility itself. Now he worked alone in a forgotten training facility beneath the main complex, mentoring new recruits no executive even bothered to meet. Far below the shining executive floor, Daniel tightened bolts on a damaged training simulator while old fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. His work uniform carried oil stains. His hands were rough. Nobody looking at him would imagine he once shaped the company's best minds. Yet every employee who excelled under pressure carried traces of Daniel's methods without even realizing it. A young trainee approached nervously. "Sir, I heard the board hired outside experts." Daniel gave a tired smile without looking up. "Then the company must believe experience can be bought." The trainee frowned. "Aren't you worried?" Daniel paused for a moment before quietly answering. "Worry doesn't feed my daughter." Those words carried the weight of years. Since his wife's death, Daniel had raised 8-year-old Lily alone. Every sacrifice, every humiliation, every extra shift existed for her. At night, after exhausting days underground, he returned to a tiny apartment where Lily waited with crayons scattered across the table and innocent questions about why her father always looked tired. Daniel never complained. He simply smiled and carried the pain silently. But upstairs, Victor Hale was preparing to erase the last piece of Daniel Reeves from the company forever. 2 weeks later, the atmosphere inside Virex Dynamics changed completely. The company announced the arrival of the Apex Initiative, a new elite team of world-renowned experts hired to revolutionize training and operations. Giant banners hung across the headquarters displaying polished photos of the incoming specialists: military strategists, corporate psychologists, efficiency engineers, and leadership consultants with degrees from famous institutions. Employees whispered in admiration as the experts walked through the lobby wearing tailored suits and confident smiles. Victor Hale personally welcomed them during a massive company presentation attended by hundreds of workers. "The future of Virex begins today," Victor declared proudly on stage. "We are leaving outdated methods behind." Sitting quietly near the back row, Daniel listened without expression. Nobody noticed him except Marcus Cole, one of the company's senior supervisors. Marcus had once trained directly under Daniel years ago and never forgot it. He leaned closer and muttered, "This is wrong." Daniel simply shrugged. Companies evolve. But Marcus knew better. This wasn't evolution. It was betrayal. After the presentation ended, Victor guided the experts through the headquarters like trophies. Cameras flashed. Executives applauded. Yet something unexpected happened during the facility tour. As the group entered the lower training sector, several experts suddenly slowed down. staring at the systems around them with visible confusion. One woman, Dr. Elena Torres, examined a simulation module carefully. "Who designed this framework?" she asked. Victor answered casually, "An old employee. We're replacing most of it." But Elena didn't move. Her eyes widened slightly as she studied the structure. "This isn't outdated," she whispered. "This is genius." Another expert joined her, pointing toward handwritten adjustment notes near a console. "These adaptive response algorithms. I've only seen concepts like this in military research." Victor's smile faded slightly. "Well, our new systems will surpass it." Just then, Daniel emerged from a side corridor carrying repair tools. None of the executives paid attention to him, but the experts immediately noticed something different. Daniel moved with calm precision, quietly fixing problems before others even recognized them. Elena watched him carefully. "Excuse me," she called out. "Do you work here?" Daniel nodded politely. "Maintenance and training support." Victor interrupted quickly. "He handles small operational tasks." Daniel lowered his eyes and continued walking, uninterested in attention. But Elena couldn't stop staring. Something about the man felt familiar. Not his face, but his methods. The way he organized equipment. The way trainees instinctively listened when he spoke. Later that evening, while reviewing archived training files, Elena discovered something shocking. Nearly every successful system inside Virex traced back to one name: Daniel Reeves. Simulation logic, psychological conditioning methods, crisis management protocols, team synchronization exercises. His fingerprints were everywhere. Yet current executive records barely mentioned him at all. Confused, Elena asked Marcus Cole privately, "Who exactly is Daniel Reeves?" Marcus stared at her for several seconds before answering quietly, "He built this company's people." The words stayed in Elena's mind all night. Meanwhile, Victor celebrated upstairs with champagne and investors, completely unaware that the very experts he hired to replace Daniel were beginning to realize who had truly trained them all. Rain hammered against the city streets as Daniel walked home carrying a small grocery bag in one hand and Lily's school art project in the other. His shoulders ached from hours of physical labor, but exhaustion had become normal long ago. Inside their tiny apartment, Lily rushed toward him with excitement. "Dad, my teacher says parents can visit school tomorrow." Daniel forced a smile despite the fatigue in his eyes. "Then I'll be there." Lily hugged him tightly. "Promise?" "Promise." For a brief moment, the harshness of the outside world disappeared. To Lily, Daniel wasn't an overlooked employee or forgotten genius. He was simply her hero. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table reviewing unpaid bills beneath dim lighting. Rent was overdue again. Medical debt from his late wife still lingered. His salary at Virex barely covered survival anymore. Yet despite everything, he refused to leave the company. Not because he loved Victor Hale, not because he wanted recognition, but because he still believed in the people he trained. Deep down, Daniel couldn't abandon them. The next morning, Daniel arrived early at the training facility only to find chaos unfolding everywhere. The newly hired experts struggled to manage a major simulation failure affecting dozens of recruits. Digital systems crashed repeatedly while instructors argued over conflicting protocols. Victor Hale stormed across the floor, furious. "How can world-class specialists fail basic operational control?" he shouted. Nobody answered. The experts blamed outdated infrastructure. Engineers blamed incompatible software. Panic spread rapidly as an important military contract demonstration approached within hours. Investors and government officials were scheduled to observe live performance testing that afternoon. Failure could cost Virex hundreds of millions. Victor demanded immediate solutions, but the more the experts intervened, the worse the systems became. Finally, Elena Torres noticed Daniel quietly observing the disaster from a distance. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't panicking. He was analyzing. Elena walked directly toward him. "You know how to fix this, don't you?" Daniel remained silent. "Please," she insisted. "People are about to lose their jobs." Daniel sighed softly before approaching the malfunctioning system. Without dramatic speeches or arrogance, he began issuing calm instructions. Disconnect simulation grid 4. Reset neural response calibration manually. Route trainee feedback through secondary loops. The room froze. Within minutes, the collapsing system stabilized. Recruits regained synchronization. Simulations restarted flawlessly. Even the experts stared in disbelief as Daniel solved problems they couldn't understand. Victor's face darkened with frustration rather than gratitude. Anyone could have done that, he snapped defensively. Elena turned toward him sharply. No, they couldn't. Silence filled the room. For the first time, Victor sensed control slipping away. The experts he hired were no longer blindly impressed by titles or authority. They were beginning to see something dangerous. The truth. Daniel Reeves wasn't some outdated employee surviving in the shadows. He was the foundation beneath the entire company. And Victor Hale had just humiliated the one man holding everything together. The government demonstration began at noon under intense pressure. Security officers, investors, and international clients filled the massive observation chamber overlooking the advanced training arena. Cameras streamed the event live across multiple corporate networks, while Victor Hale confidently addressed the audience from an elevated platform. Today, he announced proudly, you will witness the future of operational excellence. But beneath the polished presentation, tension spread like fire. The experts privately argued over unstable systems, while technicians scrambled to prevent another breakdown. Daniel remained in the background near the control center, unnoticed by most guests. Yet many trainees kept glancing toward him instinctively, waiting for reassurance. They trusted him more than executives. The live simulation finally began. Teams entered the arena to complete high-pressure tactical challenges designed to test communication, decision-making, and leadership under extreme stress. At first, everything seemed smooth. Then disaster struck. A severe synchronization failure caused multiple systems to malfunction simultaneously. Emergency barriers locked unexpectedly. Communication channels died. Training drones moved unpredictably. Panic erupted inside the arena as recruits became trapped in dangerous conditions. Investors stood in alarm while security personnel shouted across control stations. Victor Hale's face turned pale. "Fix it now!" he screamed at the experts. But nobody knew what to do. Elena Torres quickly realized the truth. The entire Apex initiative depended on operational frameworks originally built by Daniel Reeves. When executives modified those systems without understanding them, they unknowingly destabilized everything. She looked toward Daniel desperately. "Please." Daniel hesitated only briefly before stepping forward. The room watched silently as the forgotten trainer approached the master console. His hands moved with astonishing speed across controls few others understood. "Override automated sequencing," he ordered calmly. "Switch drones to manual relay. Open emergency neural synchronization." Employees obeyed instantly without questioning him. Within seconds, the chaos inside the arena stabilized. Doors unlocked. Drones powered down. Recruits regained control. A catastrophe that could have ended careers, or lives, disappeared under Daniel's leadership. The observation chamber fell completely silent. Investors exchanged confused looks. Government officials whispered among themselves. One executive finally asked the question everyone was thinking. "Who is that man?" Victor Hale said nothing. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely afraid, because the room had just witnessed something impossible to ignore. Authority wasn't standing on the executive platform wearing a designer suit. Authority was standing beside the damaged console in worn work clothes, saving the company without seeking attention. After the event ended, applause unexpectedly erupted. Not for Victor, not for the experts, but for Daniel Reeves. Employees who once ignored him now stared with admiration. Trainees openly cheered. Even some executives reluctantly joined the applause. Daniel looked uncomfortable under the attention, quietly stepping away from the crowd. But Elena stopped him near the exit. "Why did you stay?" she asked softly. Daniel looked toward the training arena. "Because the people inside mattered more than my pride." Elena smiled sadly. "Victor doesn't deserve your loyalty." Daniel paused before answering. "Maybe not. but they do. Upstairs in his office, Victor watched security footage of the applause replay repeatedly on giant monitors. Each clap felt like a threat to his power. And deep inside, for the first time, Victor Hale realized a terrifying possibility. The company no longer needed him nearly as much as it needed Daniel Reeves. That evening, tension spread through Virex Dynamics like poison. Employees gathered in break rooms whispering about the demonstration disaster and the man who saved everyone. Stories about Daniel Reeves traveled rapidly across departments. Younger recruits discovered archived records of his achievements. Senior staff quietly admitted that many company successes were built on Daniel's forgotten systems. Even the newly hired experts began seeking him out privately for advice. Victor Hale noticed everything: the glances, the conversations, the growing respect. And it terrified him. Power inside corporations often depends on perception, and Victor's carefully crafted image as the genius behind Virex was beginning to crack. Furious, he summoned Daniel to the executive floor late that night. The top-level office glowed beneath cold city lights as Daniel entered quietly. Victor stood beside the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You embarrassed me today," he said without turning around. Daniel remained calm. People were in danger. Victor spun around sharply. "You think they respect you now?" Daniel said nothing. Victor walked closer, lowering his voice. "You were useful once, Daniel. But useful men eventually become liabilities." The threat hung heavily in the air. Yet Daniel showed no fear. Years of hardship had already stripped fear from him. "If you wanted me gone," Daniel replied quietly, "you should have learned how the systems worked first." Victor's expression hardened instantly. "Careful." For several long seconds, silence filled the office. Then Victor made his decision. "Effective immediately, your position is terminated." Daniel absorbed the words without visible reaction. He had expected this day for years. Victor smirked slightly, mistaking calmness for defeat. "Security will escort you out tomorrow." Daniel nodded once and turned toward the door. But before leaving, he stopped briefly. "The experts you hired," he said softly. "They were trained using my methods long before they came here." Victor frowned. "What?" Daniel looked back for the first time. "You replaced me with people who unknowingly learned from me." Then he walked away. Victor stood frozen. Across the city, storm clouds gathered above the glowing skyline while Daniel drove home through heavy rain. He expected anger. Instead, he felt strangely peaceful. Maybe because deep down, he knew something Victor Hale didn't. Knowledge isn't erased when a man loses his title. Real leadership survives inside people, and every expert inside Virex carried pieces of Daniel Reeves within them. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Elena Torres sat in her hotel room reviewing old training archives late into the night. The deeper she searched, the more shocking the truth became. Daniel Reeves hadn't merely contributed to Virex Dynamics. He had quietly shaped nearly every major success in the company's history, while others claimed credit above him. And now the company had just fired the one person capable of holding it together. Elena slowly closed her laptop, realizing something dangerous was coming. Victor Hale thought he had removed a forgotten employee. In reality, he had just declared war against the foundation of his entire empire.